Good afternoon. Can I have your attention, please? Hello, everyone out there. Good afternoon, everyone. We want to get started, so we keep on time. We've got a full house today, which is great to see all of you. My name is Donna Lucas, and I am the chair of the Public Policy Institute of California, which is a terrific job because I get to come to things like this. That's amazing. And we are so delighted today to have Senator Dianne Feinstein as our guest. This is the second event in PPIC's 2016 Speaker Series on California's future. And I would sincerely like to thank our sponsors who make this event possible, who make it possible for you all to have a free lunch and to provide this not only for us here, but also online. And the names of our sponsors are listed on the screens over here, and they have done a phenomenal job in doing this for us, and so we want to thank them. So can we do a round of applause? This series is also funded by the PPIC Donors Fund, a group of individuals and organizations that provide generous support to PPIC. Funding from our donors, from the donor circle, also make these events possible. If you're interested in joining the donor circle or being a sponsor, please look at our website, ppic.com or .org, or there are several PPIC staff that are here that can talk to you about that. I encourage you to do so. But before we begin, a few housekeeping items. Later today, after the session, you'll receive an email from PPIC asking for your opinion about the program. We are always trying to improve our program, so please take a few minutes and fill that out. And I also want to remind you to please turn your cell phones off, because you really don't want to miss a minute of this phenomenal program. So with that, I would like to invite our president, Mark Baldassare, to the stage with Senator Dianne Feinstein, and enjoy the program. Thank you.
You're going to sit over here? Thank you, Donna, for that wonderful introduction. We appreciate it. Senator Feinstein, what a privilege and honor to have you here today at our Speaker Series event. And I know that everyone in the audience here is well aware of your record of public service, but I just want to mention a couple of things in opening about Senator Feinstein. Known around Washington as someone who is an independent voice, who tries to find the common ground and solutions between Republicans and Democrats. Those are valuable and all too rare qualities in the political environment in which we work today, and we appreciate that emphasis for the sake of our state and for California. Senator Feinstein was first elected to the Senate in 1992, and that means that she is one of the most senior members of the Senate now. She is, I think I looked and saw that you were listed as the person who is number 10 in terms of seniority. And so we benefit from that experience that you bring to work every day in Washington. Senator Feinstein serves on the Judiciary Committee. That's something that we've heard a little bit about in the last week. The Intelligence Committee, yeah, there's been some news around that too. And also on the Appropriations Committee, where she works on the subcommittee of water and energy. So those are all very timely issues for California. And when we first corresponded about this event today, we thought it would be most valuable for our audience, at least from a starting point, to talk about some of the issues that are in front of the nation and very meaningful to California that we would like to see the President and the Congress working on this year. But I think that let's begin by talking about the nomination process that's going on for a Supreme Court right now, which has really not really created, but emphasized the partisan divide we have in our country. I actually saw the polling. The polling was right down the middle on the issue of the Supreme Court nomination now as well. So, Senator Feinstein, from your perspective, what is the process now that we're going through in talking about the Supreme Court nomination? What does that tell us about what the working of the President and Congress is going to be like this year?
Thank you very much, Mark. Before answering that question, let me just say it's great to be here. We drove up on a day when we looked out the car and the fields were green, and it was the traditional drizzle of this kind of type of year in the area, and I thought, oh, it's so good to be home. And then I came here, and you've heard the old adage, there's no such thing as a free lunch. Well, this is my first free lunch. So it is a very special and memorable occasion. Never happened before. So thank you so much. And let me just thank the sponsors of this and the people that paid the bill for this, because I think it's very important that the communities can get together, and that's what PPIC does, and enable people to come before you. You may agree with them, you may not agree with them. It doesn't really matter. But I think the point is that it gets people to think, and hopefully to think constructively. Now, the Supreme Court process, Mark. The process is a pretty simple one. The President nominates and the Senate confirms. With most judges, particularly the Article III, the appellate court judges of the federal bench, we recommend, we can make a recommendation to the President. The President doesn't have to take it, but he does take it generally. And in order to produce judges that way, I have a judicial screening committee. Nancy Miller from this area used to be on it. Dave Casey, who lives in San Diego, is the head of it, and we have different branches. And so I don't give names to the screening committee. People, if they're interested, they send in their application, and the committee essentially interviews them. And the committees are all, I think, people that understand the justice system of our country, which is a great system. And then a series of recommendations are made to me, and I either interview the top three or I select one, and that's the name I will recommend to the President. All bets are off with a Supreme Court justice, however. This is a true presidential, lonely decision to nominate someone. Now, when that individual then comes to the Senate, it becomes a very rocky road, I'm sorry to say. When I sat on the committee, I'm number 2 in seniority on the committee, on the Democratic side. When I first came, the first nominee was Justice Ginsburg. And I remember both Senator Hatch and Senator Grassley pointing out that they believed that a president deserved his nominees, provided those nominees were qualified, skilled, had no moral turpitude issues, etc. And that was very heartening. And so I think Justice Ginsburg only had something like 6 or 7 no votes against her. In any event, it was very small. And that was the Senate that I came to. And I was so proud of this. Then I think beginning with the Gingrich Revolution, it began to change. And things became very partisan. And the party in power can always create an obstacle. They can stop, they can be stubborn, they cannot calendar a judge. So in 2015, we heard 11 nominations, and it took 286 days, which is astonishing, and 10 out of the 11 were unanimously confirmed. There are 74 now waiting. The average time in history of confirming a Supreme Court justice is about 68 days. So you can see what has changed. There is no formal rule. You've heard, well, there's a Thurman rule. It isn't a rule. It's a practice that some developed when they were in a position of the majority to simply stop nominations from proceeding. And over time, the rule has sort of developed, either it's the 6 months or it's anything after July, the 4th of July of the last year of a president's tenure doesn't move through. Well, that's not the case right now. This president has a quarter of his term just about remaining. He has nearly 1 full year. Remember, he serves into January of the following year. And he is entitled, I believe, to make this nomination. And I believe he will make this nomination. Now, whether that nomination will be able to be moved in this particular Congress is unknown. So we will have to wait and see. But I think reasonable people have to look at our system of justice. Big issues, a trial court decision, a federal appellate court decision, and then the aggrieved party who ends up in the minority can always appeal to the Supreme Court. And then the Supreme Court elects whether they believe they should play a role or not. And we have at least 4 big cases which the Supreme Court will hear. If these cases are ties 4-4, then whatever the opinion of the appellate court was prevails. So what this means is people are essentially shorted on the system of justice, because that last big rung, which is so important in cases like abortion, like immigration, cases of that nature won't be able to be settled if there are close questions and if there is a tie vote. So I believe very strongly that we can do this well within the 68-day margin, that we can have somebody in place at the very latest by the middle of the year, and that that person can be sitting on these cases. And I think that's where we should go. If the system isn't fully staffed, the justice of the system is shorted because you do not have this last, often most important and most definitive step, which after all is a Supreme Court decision.
Mm-hmm. Very good. So what do you think is going to happen when you go back next week?
Oh, well, one of the, I'm not clairvoyant, but I think the president will likely, perhaps not next week, mm-hmm. but in the near term, mm-hmm. provide a nominee. Mm-hmm. My own view is that if that nominee has been confirmed before by both political parties, that takes a lot of the angst out of it and a lot of the opposition out of it, because you can say, well, you voted for this individual for an appellate court or for a trial court mm-hmm. position, not much has changed. Why won't you vote them for the Supreme Court, where they now have much more mm-hmm. experience? Mm-hmm. So that would certainly be desirable. The second thing would be a nominee, I think, that people knew instinctively mm-hmm. was qualified, mm-hmm. had bona fides that were excellent, could meet virtually any test of a thoughtful, erudite, knowledgeable scholar of the law. And that's really what we're interested in finding. And candidly, I wish we could go back to the days when I first went to the Senate, where the belief was that every president deserves his nominations. This president still has a quarter of appointments that he could make to positions of considerable authority throughout the federal government that have been stalled, 25% of them. And that shouldn't happen. And you know, some people say, well, just wait, what goes around comes around. That's not a way either to practice good government, that if one side does this, the other side's going to do that when they're in power. That does not make any sense. So I really give a good degree of credit to Leader McConnell because he wanted to stop this. And he wanted to go back to regular order and wants to do the appropriation bills, which have gotten tied up in this, which means you don't have the president's budget enacted into law. You just continue with the same, it's called a continuing resolution, the way it was the year before. And this is not the way we should operate. We should do our work, we should take our votes, and we should see and be able to claim with some pride that we do the people's business well.
Thank you. Well, thank you. I'm going to take out my cell phone now and ask you a question about your work as Vice Chair of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence and all the discussions that are going on about data encryption now and how do we balance privacy and security issues. This is an issue that doesn't seem to be so much a partisan divide because there are Democrats and Republicans, I think, on both sides of the issue, but a very important issue of our time. And it's so good to have you here today.
Thank you.
While all of this is in the news. I'll leave my phone here.
Okay.
It has no back door now, I don't think.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
So what is your question?
My question is, where do you stand on data encryption? And how do we balance privacy and security issues in a world in which we have events like we had in San Bernardino last month? Or in December?
Just a quick response as to my bona fides to say this. I have served on this committee now for over 15 years. I've been chairman of the committee for 6 years. I'm now the ranking member. It's called the vice chairman of the committee. Richard Burr is the chairman of the committee. I worked very closely when I was chairman with Saxby Chambliss of Georgia. And thanks to Richard Burr wanting to continue the tradition, we work closely together. And so I really believe that this committee should know no partisanship because the issue is too important. It's the thing I spend the most time on, ladies and gentlemen. The reading of intelligence takes up a lot of time. We meet twice a week. The hearings take up a lot of time. And in the course of so doing, you get a picture of the world which isn't on the front page of the newspaper. And I can tell you, it is a very dangerous world. I can tell you that there is a war going on without a war being declared. I can tell you that this terrorist group, ISIS, is morphing. It is a government. It runs a government. It has money from oil and from theft. It has approximately 36,500 fighters. They come from all over the world, and it has now established itself in 11 countries. And its goal is to wipe out the West, to create a caliphate under Sharia law. And I keep on the side of my desk, just so I can remember what we're up against, a pile and a folder of photographs. And I'm going to tell you about one because it's on the top. And it's a little girl. She's 6 years old. She's most likely a Christian Yazidi from northern Iraq. She has on a plaid gingham dress, just like anyone in this country would put their 6-year-old in, white tights, Mary Jane's. She's lying on her back, a red wristband, and her head has been chopped off. Now that is pure evil. And I can replicate that dozens of times with horrendous photographs. And so this is a force that is absolutely antithetical to our way of liberty, of freedom, of justice, and of the ability to practice their own religion free of harassment. We are the antithesis of what these groups are. I believe we either fight them there or we fight them here. And to get to the encryption issue, you know, I have now had I make this very personal, a terrorist attack on my soil, the state of California, where I represented 8 people who were killed, innocent people at a holiday lunch, 22 who were wounded by a couple. Now, we don't know whether that couple were what we would call lone wolves, whether they just listened to some of the doctrine that comes across the internet, go out and kill, 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 find Americans, kill them. We don't know that. Or whether they are part of some cell planted here, developing here, with more people connected. And that's where the iPhone comes in. They are dead. You cannot interrogate the dead, so you're not going to get any information from them. But that phone, pursuant to new technology, is encrypted. And the FBI, with all of the sources they have for this, cannot unencrypt it. And so what has happened is the United States Attorney has gone to the federal court with a warrant. And when this happens, and there's probable cause, and there's plenty of probable cause here, that warrant has been granted. And Apple is refusing to cooperate with the federal government. I think that is wrong. Apple is not above the laws of the United States, nor should anyone or any company be above the laws. And to have a court warrant granted and Apple say they're still not going to cooperate, I think is really wrong. So we will see what happens. Senator Burr and I have been trying to put together a bill. It seems very simple, but it's not that simple to do, which would provide that when there was probable cause, and here's the probable cause, we don't know the depth and breadth of that San Bernardino incident. We don't know where everybody came from. We don't know if friends participated. We don't know if it was directed from abroad, if there are others waiting. So here's the thing. You reach a point, and I can say I've reached this point, where I have to protect the people of this country. I really do. I took an oath of office to do that. Do it within the Constitution. Do it within the law. And so I think I understand Apple's motivation, but I think it's a mistake. I would be hopeful that Mr. Cook, whom I have talked to on matters that are similar to this, would reconsider, and that they would work with the federal government to see that that phone is unencrypted in a way that the information can be recovered. You should know that that phone belonged to the county, and the county has given their permission for that phone to be opened as well. So we will see. We'll see what happens. But I really want you to understand that if you know there are bad people out there, And you know there are surveillances of bad people going on. And if we've learned anything from 9/11, it is that the smokestacks of intelligence, which did not allow the communication between various intelligence agencies, are now down. And that kind of communication can go on. But if you're going to have a whole world of communication, like a telephone, but it is all encrypted, and if something terrible happens with a court warrant, the government cannot get in to get that information, that's a real problem for the safety of everyone.
And one likely to be debated and discussed more in Congress because there are a variety of different opinions. Congressman Lofgren had other points of view that she talked about today. Yeah, we could talk more about that, but I want to get to the 184-page bill, which is sitting in the back of the room, the new water bill.
Yeah, it's a new water bill.
Congratulations on that. And that has been out now for about a week, I guess, a week to 10 days. And I know it was a lot of work to put together. I know you've been working on this topic for a couple of years, at least.
We've been working on the bill for 2 years with like 26 different drafts.
Right. So this is the drought relief bill. So if we could talk for a moment about this particular bill and what your thinking is about coming back with this bill at this particular point in the legislative cycle.
Okay. I remember back in 1966. As a matter of fact, I was up here. I was in the mansion for an event. I just sent the governor a picture of myself and Gene McCarthy and the governor's father and mother and him and I. This is 50 years old now. And just found it. And at that time, Pat Brown was running for re-election, and he was talking about his state water project. That was the last water infrastructure for the state of California, the state water project. At the time, we were about 16 million people. You know how many people we are today? Close to 40 million. The census said 39.1, and we have at least 2 million undocumented people living in California. So assuming a number of them didn't get caught up in the census for one reason or another, you can say that there are 40 million people living in the state of California with the same water infrastructure that we had for 16 million people. And you know that when water gets short, when drought is upon us, it's not going to work. So what we have tried to do in the bill, the first part of the bill, and there are bills back there, there's a press statement back there, there's a summary back there, and that table, and I'd encourage anyone to take it and look at it. What we have tried to do is develop support for a new water infrastructure for the future. This is long term. And it's about $1.3 billion. We offset that money. We have found money that can pay for it. And essentially what it is, there are a large number of desalination projects that have been sent to us by state institutions that are worthy of funding. And there are over 100 recycling projects, much like they do in Orange County, where they take sewage and turn it into drinking water. I've actually seen it. Believe it or not, I've actually drunk the water, which was kind of the first time a bit of a shock that there's no taste at all. And in any event, it's also water smart. There are loan programs. There is $600 million for storage. We know we have to be able to hold water from the wet years for the dry years. And so this is a major part of the bill. There's also a short-term part of the bill. And to this end, we have worked in all the bills I have done in the 22 years I've been in the Senate. I've never shared this with more people or had more consultation on developing this bill. We have worked with virtually every state agency that has responsibility for the environmental part of this or the water part of it, and the same thing with the federal agencies. We have taken care of every concern they've had. The Reclamation Agency of the federal government has said this complies with environmental standards that are in the law. We have reinforced those standards, which are the Endangered Species Act, as well as biological opinions, as well as a very strong savings clause in the bill. But essentially what we say is, maybe I have one of those, I don't have it here, but there is a chart that shows you two things if you pick one up. The first is water coming through the pumps for the month of January, and the second is the pumping level. And you will see a big hump where the water went up to very high cubic feet per second and then came back down again. All of that water was missed, and it was missed because of something called a turbidity bridge, where the belief is that when waters are turbid, the smelt gets caught in the pumps. And for a year, all you can get caught in the pumps are 54 smelt. Only one smelt has been entrained, and I think that was yesterday. But the point is that the governments have not shown the flexibility to be able to hold that water. So rather than set mandatory standards, what we do is provide 8 specific things, which if you want, I can quickly go through.
Up to you.
How this, well, stop me if it's boring.
I know this table over here from our Water Policy Center Advisory Council.
Okay, to this table over here. We have daily boat monitoring for the smelt when turbidity is high that will allow pumping decisions to be based on facts. We believe they are based on intuition. And we believe that that huge surge of water coming in January, a lot of it could have been stored and saved. It may have been cloudy, but it could have been stored and saved. No smelt were entrained. Currently now, when you do save water during the winter storms, you have to pay back that water. We eliminate the payback provision so that water can be saved. We require agencies to explain when they reduce pumping to provide the reason for doing so that everybody can know what the reason is. Agencies must maximize water supplies consistent with all laws and biological opinions. We keep the Delta cross-channel gates open more often. Doing so means that more water can be stored in reservoirs rather than released to flush salty water through the Delta. We extend the time for water transfers. One of the things that I was able to be helpful with was the development of water transfers north-south and east-west so that willing sellers can sell water to willing buyers wherever they are, north, south, east, west. And the water transfers had to be 4-to-1 before. You could only do 1 part to 4 parts that were not available to you. We've gone to 1-to-1, so that will increase the ability of water transfers. And we have added 5 months, extended this by 5 months, during which time these water transfers can take place. So the 1-for-1 transfer means more willing sellers, more willing buyers. And we expedite the review of transfers and construction of barriers that will both help buyers of water and fish. We also have a program of some millions of dollars for refuges, for doing those things which can improve conditions for fish and improve them hopefully for the fisher population of our state, people whose livelihoods depend on fishing. So that's the composite of the bill. It does a number of other things, but these are just specifically the provisions that we believe can provide more water, plus the long-term water provisions of the bill.
Senator
It's a
Feinstein.
not bill. I'm sorry.
No.
It's probably boring.
No,
but
not boring.
pick up your copy. Maybe it'll be more exciting. I don't know.
Not boring at all to this audience, and appreciative of your long-term commitment to working in the area of water. Do you see this Congress and this president acting on it? My question was more of a strategic one around the bill at this point in time.
Well, the federal departments have said that the bill is in compliance with all environmental law, so that's a very good sign. We have talked with the governor about it, we've talked with their agencies about it, and I am very hopeful that the state will support it. If we have the support of the state and the federal government, that improves the situation. I believe there are 2 members of the House that will be introducing the bill hopefully next week.
Okay.
So the bill will have currency in the House. Additionally, we have some 30 major agencies across the state who are supporting the legislation or agreeing with the legislation. So that's good. These are the big water agencies for cities as well as for the Central Valley conduit of water.
So do you see this bill more as focused on the drought situation and the fact that we're likely to have more droughts given our changing climate? Or are there other long-term fixes, the Delta, for example, which are not part of this bill that you think will be important for California to have, a reliable and clean sources of water?
Well, the whole first part of the bill is a long-term bill. That's
Okay.
the new infrastructure. That's funding desalination. It's research for the third stage membrane, which makes the energy coefficient extremely positive. And that research is going on now. We have 1 desal plant. It's being built in Southern California by Poseidon. They've built, as you know, Israel has led the world with respect to desalination, and Poseidon has done some of their plants as well. We also have a large number of other plants that are quite possible to be built, and we provide some funding for those to move ahead, and the big recycling projects. All together, this is well over 1 million cubic feet of additional water. So we believe that the bill long-term provides the emphasis or the inducements for a new water infrastructure. Short-term, this is just for the length of the governor's state of emergency or 2 years, whichever is longer. Then it goes out of play. It is the short-term bill that people are saying they don't want. But if you go back and look at that chart, and you look at that hump of water that we could have had in a reservoir now, saving it, that's gone, and you see how the pumps are operating at the bottom at the low levels, you will see that in a drought, we have to do something because people count too. There are people that are bathing out of bottled water. There are almost 3,000 wells that have run dry. There are almost 1 million acres of land that has been fallowed. You know, rice farmers have fallowed their land. Everybody's fallowed their land, some of it. And you can't, everybody's got to do their share, and we've got to take what water we can and save it, $600 million in that $1.3 billion to add to a storage facility. If it's a dam, sites may be the dam. It has a joint powers agreement. It's expensive, Another dam that's federal is Shasta. That's very cost effective. It's not that much new water, but it's very cold water. And it's only $1,100,000. Sites is supposed to be in the vicinity of $4 billion. So these are things that you need to know the details of. But your government must do the right thing so that this state has good, clean water. Because we can't function, business can't function without it. Particularly high tech that ought to be giving us a hand because they need high quality water.
I want to take some questions from the audience, but first I wanted to ask you about your observations about what I've been noticing as somebody who does a lot of polling in California and watches the national polls. In this election year, economic insecurity seems to be a theme which is playing out both in the Republican primaries and in the Democratic primaries. The recovery has been uneven. For some people are still struggling. Families trying to make ends meet. People trying to figure out how to raise themselves up the economic ladder. Wonder if you're noting that both on the Republican and Democratic side in this presidential year, and whether you think that there are solutions that government should be focusing on to reduce the kind of economic insecurity that so many people in America and California have today.
This is a very complicated question too, and the candidates, particularly on the Republican side, have simplified it inordinately. And we have several mandates, and these mandates now are not in the budget. It's Social Security, it's health care, and it's Medicare. And they eat up 2/3 of all of the money with interest, and interest on the debt, it comes to almost 70%. So those are mandatory. They're not in the budget because if you get Social Security, you're entitled to it. If you're on Medicare, you're entitled to it. So the Congress doesn't control the costs per se. Most people don't know that. So the only way to measure what the federal government really spends is in outlays. And I can tell you, we have to be very careful because I have watched for 15 years the entitlements that we have grow. I do constituent breakfasts. We have charts. I have one of them in my book here that shows what it is today and then the projection of what it will be in 10 years. So if you have somebody that proposes single payer in health care and
do you know anybody like that?
7 taxes, 7 taxes aren't going to go through the Congress. It's just a fact. It isn't. Single payer may have worked at one point, but there is such a developed healthcare series of institutions that are run privately and by states that it's very difficult to put in a single payer system, I think, at this stage, let alone pick up everybody's college tuition, which is the second part of that. With more tax, it won't happen. And I'd rather spend my time on things I really believe can be possible and that can benefit people than what I know isn't going to happen. So that's the first thing. You ask me why people are upset. Let me give you my best take on it. Productivity is up. Now, what does that mean? That means people are working harder than they've ever worked. They're working longer than they've ever worked. They want to make the economy function well. But pay is not up. And that's the gap that people feel, that we have a lot of minimum wage and temporary jobs in California. And so a woman with 2 children working on the minimum wage in LA has to work 2 jobs just to pay the rent on an inexpensive apartment for herself and her 2 children. Now, that's not the California dream. The California dream is still, by the dint of your labor, you can one day, somehow, some way, own your own home, have your automobile, and your children will do better than you did. And so that dream has nails stuck into it. And we've got to pull those nails out, and we've got to restore the dream. And this comes through entrepreneurship. This comes by helping businesses get established. This comes by removing obstacles in the form of arbitrary regulations. And that's a problem in California. There are a lot of arbitrary regulations, and it's often the reason why people move to other states. I worked very hard to try to keep the nominee plant, which was a Toyota joint venture with, I forget the... General Motors, thank you, and General Motors. And matter of fact, a long time ago, the Toyota brother, I happened to be chairman of the Japan Society at the time, I just left being mayor, and I took him several times out to Fremont to see this plant. And he said when he left and went back to Japan, this plant is producing equal in quality and quantity to any Toyota plant anywhere in Japan. Just-in-time inventories, robotics, quality circles, 3-mile long line, 2 shifts a day, going to go into 3 shifts a day, 5,500 workers. And they got fed up with certain things. And where'd they go? They went to Kentucky. And we've got to stop that from happening. Now, California produces high-skilled jobs. There's a huge tech industry, a huge intellectual industry, an academic industry. So skills pay off in California, but not everybody is going to be eligible. So manufacturing matters. Manufacturing and the ability to earn a good living wage by making something matters. I've been pushing for restored vocational help in schools. When I was mayor, the Benjamin Franklin Middle School, the kids made a desk for me. I have that desk to this day. Wow. And so they had carpentry classes. They learned how to dowel wood, how to do smooth corners at 7th and 8th graders, so that if they wanted to, they could become an apprentice in a carpenter's union later on and make good money if they didn't have either the will or the ability to go on to higher education. Student loans, big problem. There is a large number of students that have written to me and said, you know, we didn't really know what we were getting into when we got into these loans. And so this is just sort of a minor thing, but one thing that could be done that we're looking at is, just as with a house loan, when you get a student loan, every year you have it, it spells out the principal and the interest. So as you look at what is always a complicated mortgage loan document, a school loan document, you can see every year what you would need to pay and what the interest. So at least you would have some cognizance of what you're going into, whether you'd have to take a job or whether you could manage whatever part of the tuition you could manage. So that, those are some of the issues. But I really believe that entrepreneurism is what's made this state great. It certainly is what's developed tech, it's what's developed medicine, it's what's developed machinery. People are entrepreneurial, they try, they move on. And I think we have to encourage this, not discourage it.
We're supposed to end our program at 1:15, but I'm wondering, do you have time for a couple of questions
Sure,
from the audience? And thank you so much. I have one more question for you, but I'd rather save it and see if we might have a question from somebody.
Do we have a shy group? No, we don't
No,
have a
we don't have a shy group. We never have shy groups.
Just wondering on these desalinization plants.
Could you grab the mic, which
Yeah.
is right there?
Hi, I was just wondering on these desalinization plants. You called them reasonable, and 80%.
Okay, this has to be a question,
Okay, the
first of all.
question
Okay,
is-
because we're short
Okay.
on time.
How could it ever be reasonable if some people, think they own the water when it's actually held in trust for all the California public? And the question is, what does reasonable look like when you look at someone saying they own the water and someone right next to them who needs it to drink? Are these desal plants reasonable?
Okay,
Well,
thank you.
let me answer it this way.
It's a complicated question.
It's a complicated
Yeah.
question, and I'm just going to cut through
Yeah.
it. We only have one plant in California being constructed, and that's the Poseidon plant, which will produce 300,000 acre-feet of water at $7 increase in the bill for those people that use it, as I understand it. So it would be new to California. Poseidon will be a test case. We will watch and see. San Diego has contracted for the water. This is a private plant. San Diego has contracted the city to buy the water and to distribute it. And it'll be $7 on those people's bills that get the water.
Okay. Was that a question over here? Did you ever? Yes?
You were speaking about judicial nominations earlier, and how the process had, thank you, and how the process had slowed since you first came into the Senate. Any ideas on reforming the process that it may speed up, or we continue to have a judiciary that kind of has vacancies and emergencies all the time?
I think the idea to speed it up is to denigrate the way it's run now and encourage both sides to come together. I think this can be done, incidentally. I think when it comes to appointments for the judicial system, both parties should really work very closely together. And I think there are ways to do that. There are ways even to propose joint nominations coming from some Republican, some Democratic senators. In this case, in California, we have 2 Democratic senators. So obviously, Barbara Boxer provides her nominees, I provide my nominees, and that's for the lower courts, the trial courts and the appellate court. But the president alone handles the Supreme Court. And I think a president really has to take time to try to put together a more convivial atmosphere in the Congress for the processing of his appointments. Now, how can this be done? It can be done by consultation. The president does appoint judges that Republican senators produce, no question about that. But somehow, there's a kind of animus, I believe, toward this president, and the opposition party doesn't really want him to succeed. And therefore, at this time, there are far less confirmations than I can ever remember being done in the time I've been there. And I think that is just plain wrong. We should do the business up to the point where the president leaves office and a new president comes in.
Thank you. Senator Feinstein, I have one closing question for you. Throughout most of your time in the Senate, I think all but a couple of months, you've overlapped with Senator Boxer. There will be a new senator from California a year from now. What advice are you going to have for our new senator about how to be an effective leader and representative for California and coming in and working in Washington?
Well, you know, everybody's different. And everybody walks to the sound of their own drummer. My drummer is to use the time to get things done. If I can't do them through legislation, I'll do them another way. And I've got a number of projects that have been done, like redwoods that were saved. That wasn't legislation. That was negotiation. The bay, the salt pond removal, that wasn't legislation. That was just negotiating and getting it done. So my measure is getting things done. And that's why the desert has been so important, and getting those bills through. And it took a long time to do it, but doing that. Others, it's rhetoric. And you hear a lot of that on the campaign trail. You don't hear a lot of specifics. And when you come down to it, the specifics really matter, because they, in effect, determine whether you get it done or not.
Well, thank you for getting it done.
Oh,
for
you're
us.
welcome.
Really
Thank you,
appreciate it.
everybody. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you for joining us today. Thanks to the sponsors for making this possible. And Senator Feinstein, thank you for your leadership. Thank you. This was wonderful.